Booksy, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to Italy, particularly Naples, Italy, because we're going to be discussing the Neapolitan Novels, which is a series of 4 books written by someone who goes by the name of Elena Ferrante. For several years and over the course of many books, and even more guesses and rumors as to who the author really was, her true identity has remained hidden. It wasn't until 2016 when a journalist from the New York Book Review followed the money trail from the publishing house that produces these books and concluded that the author, Elena Ferrante, is actually a German translator. That woman still hasn't confirmed the identity, and so we're left to continue speculating as to whether she is Elena Ferrante or whether her husband is Elena Ferrante. Maybe it doesn't matter, and maybe it's better not knowing, because in the case of the Neapolitan novels, Elena is the name of the author, but Elena is also the name of the main narrator. And it leaves you to think that a lot of the novel is autobiographical, which actually helps in reading and getting immersed in the story. So this is a 4-part series, and it's about 1,700 pages of pretty dense text. That is probably the most complete example of Bildungsroman genre that I've ever read, in that we meet the main characters when they're about 7 years old, and we follow them over the course of their lives and relationship history for about 60 years. It is written in kind of journal form, that the narrator speaks directly to the reader as though she's writing us a book. She's writing us a letter or writing a journal that she expects for us to read. When she's a young girl, we capture the angst of her developing a crush on her friend, a pretty normal crush, I suppose, in which you idolize a person who's going through a lot of the same things that you are, but deals with them in a kind of detached way, maybe in a way that you wish you could be detached from a situation. And we follow that relationship as they go through middle age and approach the older, more mature years of their life, and as they deal with some of the tragedies and hardships of losing family members and friends. While they are sold as individual novels, you won't be able to stop. If you start this book and enjoy it, you want to know what happens next. Book 1 is entitled My Brilliant Friend, and it opens with a scene where Elena, or Lenu as she's affectionately known in the dialect, received a telephone call from Lila's son, Reno. His mother has gone missing, and he wants her to help him find her. Beginning the novel with that scene, the author actually gives us some kind of a security. While Lila's current circumstances are unknown, we don't know whether she's disappeared because she's dead or whether she's wandered off because she has dementia. We don't know exactly what has happened to her, but it does give us some kind of comfort to know that she survived to be a 60-something-year-old woman, because while we read on these pages, Lila is outspoken, she's unafraid and rebellious, and she gets herself into some situations that if you didn't know at the beginning that she survived to be 60-something years old, you would think that she was going to die at any point. I think the book describes beautifully the tragedy and beauty of childhood and adolescence and the teen years. It captures the angst and the crushes and the fears of being known but also being obscure, and the extremes of feelings that these characters endure is portrayed really adequately, really well in this book. The characters' names were a little confusing, and at the beginning of the book, before their personalities became distinct, I kept having to refer to the character index to keep people and their relationships straight. I love the way both girls seem to think highly of each other, even if they have very different ways of expressing their admiration. And in the end, I like the ambiguity of who the brilliant friend really was, because both Lenu and Lila say this of each other, that they consider the other person to be their brilliant friend, and they're just happy to be basking in the afterglow of the other person's scholarly aptitudes. But something that comes through very clearly from the beginning and all the way to the end of this installment is that Elena, even though she is a narrator, she comes across as a sidekick. Even in the opening scene where the man is telephoning his aunt to say that his mother has gone missing, it is as though Elena is only capturing what the main character is doing, as though her friend is the main character and she's just the journalist writing things down. I had trouble liking Elena in her reaction to what her friend Lila does. It's obvious that Lila is the more outgoing. She's the protagonist. She's the one who gets things going. She's the one who throws the dolls down in the cellar and forces these 2 little 7-year-old girls to knock on the door of the community ogre and have an encounter with him that changes their lives. It changes his life in some way as well. But I have trouble liking this person, even if I understand her, even if I know why she's doing things. I just don't like Elena, don't like her in this book, and not sure whether I like her throughout the rest of the reading. As it relates to the cover of this book, this picture is not a scene that comes from the pages. Instead, I think it is a composite of various significant things that happen in this book. While there is a wedding, one of the girls does get married. She's described as being taller than her groom, and in this picture, her groom is obviously taller than she is. When she's a teenager, one of the girls gets a job as a caretaker for 3 little girls. But these 3 little girls are not invited to the wedding. There are several scenes where there are people trying to escape. They're trying to escape Naples. They're trying to escape to the water for one or another reason. While it is a beautiful picture and it does make a beautiful cover, it doesn't describe exactly what is happening in this book. So you'll have to read on or listen on for book 2. By the time we get to book 2, we're used to the continued domination and submission that Leela and Lenu submit each other to in their complicated relationship. Leela has married a local boy, and Lenu seems to be the one who's destined to fulfill the writer dreams that they both had when they were children. So it begs the question, was Leela the brilliant one to come up with the idea, or is Lenu the brilliant one for fulfilling these dreams? The text is chock full of this emotional up and down narrative where they both build each other up and tear each other down with increasing frequency. When Leela's marriage puts her in a better financial position and Lenu starts to depend on her, Leela does provide some kind of monetary assistance to help Lenu stay in school and fulfill the destiny that she has to be a scholar. It's not without emotional strings attached. So really what we're seeing on these pages is just these 2 young girls trying to climb out of their abject poverty, both in their own way. In this phase of their relationship, they're entirely codependent, but also resentful of each other for feeling that way. I think the title for this one is really appropriate because Leela, in getting married, she now has a new name, but with that name, she also now has money and power to live out her evil intentions. She's still damaged, she's still intent on hurting anyone who comes too close, and with the money and power, she now has the ability to do so. Lenu's education offers her a way of escape, and she finally comes into her own when she goes off to college. And even in her own words, you can tell that she's not entirely comfortable even while she's being empowered in this new environment. She skips over things in her history that may be significant, except that it's pretty obvious that she only sees herself in respect to her relationship with Leela. So while she's away at college, it's as though that part of her life isn't really happening. And she's only thinking about what's happening back in the Stradone when she's not there. While they were separated, Leela started keeping notebooks, and eventually she gives these notebooks to Lenu for safekeeping, and Lenu throws them away. And at first you think it's really mean for someone to throw away someone else's diary that they've given to them for safekeeping, except this is finally an act of empowerment on her behalf. She's actually doing this for herself because even though it seems like a selfish act, it seems like it's something that she had to do to advance her own progress. Like, while Leela's notebooks exist, she can't write anything of her own. And since she's the narrator, we need her to write of her own so that the story can continue. So far, we haven't talked a lot about the men or the other characters in these novels because the story is really about the relationship between Leela and Lenu, and the other characters only serve to expose the nuances in their friendship. However, there are male characters that are very significant, and Nino Saratour is one of the most important ones. He is there from the beginning. He's a childhood friend. He's from the neighborhood. Lenu develops a crush on him from book 1, and she's devastated when he begins relationships with other people. So she lies about her feelings, but everyone knows how she feels. That should include her best friend, right? Eventually, however, Leela begins her own relationship with Nino, and that relationship grows to eclipse any potential that Lenu and Nino could have ever had. When Nino disappears from their day-to-day lives, he's still just one of those things that they've done to hurt each other along the way. Eventually, in book 3, Son of Saratour strikes again. This time, Nino reappears with new relationships and tempts and taunts both of these women into reconnecting with him. Leela, it seems, has built up some immunity to Nino's charms, or maybe she's just consumed with all the other things that's going on in her life, or maybe she's just gotten him out of her system. But Lena is still coping with the frustration of her unfulfilled crush. So she's content to accept whatever scraps Nino has to offer in terms of her relationship. So the title, Those Who Leave and Those Who Stay, could refer to the relationship that these 2 young women have with Nino. Which one stays in a relationship with him and which one leaves him to his own devices. But this relationship happens against the backdrop of various successes and failures of both of these women. Elena's a published author, successful in her own right. She's a married woman, she has 2 children, and yet everything that she has accomplished fades whenever Leela fails to give her positive affirmation. In book 3, we're at the point in the story where a lot of the characters are dying, whether from middle age or from the war that's going on around them. This is Italy in the 1970s, 1980s. And it becomes a spectacularly spellbinding and yet dismal read because a lot of these are characters that we met as children. We saw them grow up on these pages, and to read about their death feels pretty personal, feels like these are characters that we know. So the title, Those Who Leave and Those Who Stay, could also refer to the people who leave this life and the people who stay around and continue to live. It could also refer to the neighborhood, because Leela has stayed in the neighborhood this whole time. She's been living in the same place where she was born. Even though as a child she had this desire to leave, she never did. However, Lenu, in leaving the neighborhood, going off to college, going off to live someplace else and lead this other life, and yet at some point coming back to the neighborhood, she becomes one of those people who both leaves and stays. And so it is very interesting, that comparison between the people who leave and the people who stay. So now we're at book 4, and I suppose that after so many pages I would have felt some sense of dissatisfaction no matter how the story concluded, but I also felt really disappointed by the author's lack of resolution in the relationship between Leela and Lenu. After reading almost 1700 pages and following a single relationship and its outsparks for a 50-plus year history, there was no way to say goodbye to these characters and still be happy about it. The author attempted to connect the beginning to the end. In book 1, the girls lost their dolls in the neighborhood, and she revived that storyline in book 4 to explain the title somewhat. Now, speaking about the title, the story of the lost child could refer to so many things, and I think, as with the other books, the title is deliberately ambiguous because it could refer to so many scenes, so many different characters from the book. Lost child could refer to the childhood of the two girls that we've been following throughout their lives, losing their childhood, and with it the innocence and optimism that the experience of maturity erases slowly but completely. Lost child could also refer to the girls themselves and the easy relationship that they enjoyed when they were children, but that became eroded as time went by and they endured experiences that changed them permanently. In this installment, multiple characters disappear, and so of course lost child could refer to any one of them. But also they're child prodigies who never realized their potential, so of course lost children could also refer to either one of those. And then there are Lenu's daughters, who one by one left home physically and emotionally to go on to have other lives outside of her, and so the lost children could be Lenu's daughters. The cover could just as easily be depicting Leela and Lenu in their childhood, or their daughters who are close in age and grew up as sisters. This 4th book didn't really do anything to endear Lenu to me as a person, and I know it's unfair of me to think of her as a bad mother, considering that the men in this book also shirk their paternity and they're no better fathers and she's a mother. But it's hard for me to cheer for a woman who abandons her children for whatever reason, as well as a woman who abandons her husband to chase after another man, especially a married man with whom there is no future relationship. In a sense, I wasn't ready for the story to wrap up because I wanted to see if Lenu would become more likable in her old age. I thought the story of the lost child was pretty strong in its accomplishments. Ferrante really manipulated the timelines and retraced earlier steps to show the passage of time, but also to show the impact of childhood events on how these characters became adults. There are two major brilliances about this book that I want to point out. One is the way the author introduced this concept of dissolving margins, which is that the more you spend time with a person, the more you change in response to them and they change in response to you. So the margin between who you are and who they are begins to dissolve as time goes on. She first introduced this concept in book 1, and she tied it back to book 4 and the disappearing characters, where it seems like if a character disappeared, if they've spent enough time with someone else, that person has become them. And so it's really not necessary to have both characters around anymore because one character has essentially encompassed the other. In a story like this one about the relationship between Leela and Lenu, we can see that over time, Leela has become Lenu and Lenu is Leela. And that became the lead-in for a question that plagued me as I read book 4. I kept thinking that Leela, not Lenu, is actually the narrator of this book. There's a point in each one of the books in this series where Leela writes something and it is considered to be brilliant, except it never reaches a wider audience because Lenu publishes something instead. There are several other clues in book 4 which point to Leela as the narrator, not Lenu, and it's one that I'd love to discuss with you if you've read this series. So I gave this book 4 stars, as I gave every other book in the series 4 stars, but overall my rating for the series as a whole is 5 stars because I think it is brilliant. It accomplished more as a set than each one of the books did on its own. So this is a case where the sum is greater than the total of the parts, or however that saying goes. So that's it. That is my review and discussion of the Neapolitan novels, all 4 books. I own the first one. My Brilliant Friend is mine. The other 3 came from the library. I'd love to talk with you about these books if you've read them. Thanks for watching this video. We'll talk down there, and until next time, happy reading. Bye. I couldn't wrap up this video without giving a shout out to K.A., who's a subscriber here on my channel and who was my buddy read partner for this entire novel series. Kay, if it wasn't for you, I might have quit in the middle of book 1. So thanks for keeping me inspired to continue reading this book, and I look forward to reading more books with you.